let's jump right in. I'm Kat. I work with Wild Alaskan Company as part of the recipe team. I cook fish almost every day, trying out different recipes, different techniques, species, flavors. Whatever you can imagine, I've probably tried it. Today's event is kind of like the inside scoop on what has personally made it really easy for me. The event is broken up into 3 different parts. The first part, we're going to do a little thawing demonstration. Part 2, we're going to go through some of my fish cooking, what I think are essentials to have in your kitchen. So tools, ingredients that I think complement any species for a variety of cooking methods. So part 3, I'll do a little cooking demo. We're gonna make some salmon today. All right, let's start part 1, thawing. If frozen fish is new to you, then thawing is probably a very new part of your routine. It's an extra step, but it's worth it if you really appreciate high quality, super fresh seafood. So frozen fish is some of the highest quality, freshest fish out there because when it's frozen at the peak of freshness, you're retaining all of this really good qualities of texture, taste, and even moisture levels in the fish that are very similar to freshly caught off the boat. So the more time it spends unfrozen, the less fresh, less high quality it's going to become. So let me go ahead and grab a frozen fillet from my freezer here. I am going to defrost some sockeye salmon. First thing that we're going to do for this, we're going to do an overnight thaw. Number 1 thing to do is take this out of the vacuum sealed packaging. So the reason you want to take it out of the vacuum pack, for one thing, this is just a good food safety practice to not defrost seafood in low oxygen environment. But more importantly, you'll notice that sometimes it looks like there's a ton of ice on it. That's because that's an ice glaze. When you're defrosting it, you want to take it out of the pack so all of that moisture and liquid doesn't sit against the fish. I usually just put it right onto a plate, something with a rim. It doesn't have to be a plate. You can use a baking sheet, but definitely something with a rim to catch any of the moisture that will eventually melt off of this. And then you just put it in the fridge right on a low shelf. Leave it overnight, maybe 10 to 12 hours at the most, depending on how thick the fillet is. And it should be ready to cook the next day. Sometimes what I like to do is actually put this onto something like paper towels or even a clean kitchen towel to help absorb some of the moisture that's defrosting off the fish. So that's a very hands-off way to defrost the fish. Just overnight, take it out of the pack, put it on a plate, and then you're ready to cook for lunch or dinner the next day. I'm going to use this same fillet to demonstrate how to do a quick thaw. So the quick thaw is super convenient. You'll have fish that's ready to cook in 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how thick the fillet is. You want to take it out of the packaging, out of the vacuum sealed packaging that it came in. Same thing as the overnight thaw. But then, this is going to seem redundant, you're going to put it into a resealable bag. Doesn't matter if it's a big bag or a small bag, not a vacuum sealed bag, but something that has a tight seal. And then I have a bowl of cold tap water, not warm water, not hot water, just cold tap water. This is going to go straight into the water here. Usually the fish will float a little bit because there's air in the bag. If that's the case, you can just find another object to weigh it down to keep the fish submerged and keep that defrosting going. So this is going to defrost the fish pretty gently on the countertop and safely, which is what we're going for when we're defrosting any raw protein at room temperature. This I would check on in 30 minutes to see how it's doing, change out the water in 30 minutes with a fresh batch of cold water. And then once it's defrosted, you do need to cook it. So, whether it's 30 minutes or an hour, you want to cook it right away. You can't keep this for another night. You can't keep this for later tonight. You have to cook it now, just in terms of food safety. So this is great if you're thinking about, hey, I'm getting hungry for dinner. What should I make tonight? I'll make some fish. Set this out on the countertop. You can, prep some veggies, go read a book, and come back to the fish and be ready to cook in 30 minutes to an hour. This fillet is pretty thin. Sockeye tends to be a thinner fish because it's a smaller fish. So I think that this rate, it'll probably be ready to cook in 30 minutes. So I'm going to set this aside just onto the countertop here for almost a little later, not too much later. Those are the 2 methods. So overnight and the quick thaw. If you don't have time, though, to defrost at all, you can also cook salmon from frozen. I am definitely a big advocate of cooking salmon from frozen when you are hungry. You do sacrifice some control over the doneness of the fish. Naturally, the outside's going to cook much faster than a frozen core. I do this from time to time. It's a great way to not have popcorn for lunch. Instead of popcorn, I can have a crispy seared fillet of salmon in literally 15 minutes from the freezer to the plate. So now let's go to part two. These are some of my essentials. I truly believe that cooking any species of fish can be as basic as cooking any protein. Even if you're not super familiar with the species, there are a lot of things that are pretty standard for any fillet. And there are some essential tools that can make cooking any species just super, super easy. So I would say that one of the most important tools is knowing cook times. So we have how-to cooking guides up on the blog for whether you have a salmon box, a combo box, or a whitefish box. These guides are so helpful. I also have some like in real life tools that are my favorite things. So fish spatula. The fish spatula is a essential, I think, utensil to have in your utensil drawer or your utensil cup, wherever you keep your spatulas. This is a lot thinner and a lot more flexible than like your run-of-the-mill spatula. I mean, this is like thin too, but your fillet is going to be about double the length of this like regular spatula. Any fillet is going to be able to fit on this, even something long like rockfish. So this is going to make it infinitely easier to flip a fillet if you're searing it. It'll be much easier to get this off of a baking sheet onto a plate without having it fall apart. So anytime I'm going any place where I know I'm cooking, but I don't know if they have a fish spatula, I bring my own. Highly recommend adding this to your arsenal. The other tool that maybe doesn't seem like a tool is kitchen towels or paper towels, but this is really good for patting fish dry. So this is the #1 way to level up, like instantly reach the next level of cooking if you're not used to cooking seafood. By getting rid of some of the excess moisture on the surface of a fillet, just a gentle pat dry, you're going to be able to get an awesome sear, a really good crisp, nice browning. You're able to actually sear the fish. When there's moisture on there, more likely it's going to end up steaming the surface of the fish rather than getting it like a nice golden caramelization. So don't ever forget to pat the fish dry. Broiling, searing, baking, grilling, especially, make sure you're giving that fish a nice little pat dry on both sides. Another tool that I use is an instant read thermometer. This is a really good tool to have when you're trying to get to know what the fish looks like when it's done. This is a good way to measure the internal temperature of the fish. Knowing this is going to be a really good way to dial it in, whether you want something medium done, medium rare, or if you want to cook something well done, because it's a nice objective measure. With a really thick fillet, knowing how done the center is great with this, so you don't have to flake the whole fish apart to find out if it's ready to eat or not. So, and then just to reiterate, the member experience team, great resource for any food questions. If you need recipe inspiration, if you're having trouble getting something to brown, reach out to them. All right, couple ingredients before I do a little cooking demo. #1 thing I want to share is panko breadcrumbs. They're going to add so much texture to the fish, whether you're using this to bread a fillet. If you're baking something, you can sprinkle some of those on top, tossed with a little olive oil or garlic, and make like a nice crust. This is a good binding ingredient if you're making something like fish cakes. It's just a really good, ready-to-use carb that is very multi-purpose. I eat salmon with just like a little salt and pepper on it, and that feels good to me. But if I add breadcrumbs in there somewhere, somehow, it feels like a more complete meal. The next ingredient I want to talk about is a sauce. Having a ready-made sauce, whether it's freshly prepared at like a deli counter or something just like off the shelf, this is a really good way to have instant flavor. There's a lot of different ways you can play around with store-bought sauces. So whatever that one amazing favorite sauce is for you, don't be shy, like try using it with your fish. And the last ingredient I want to share is miso paste. I love having miso in the fridge. It's pretty salty, so it'll last you a long time. And a little bit goes a long way. This is a really great ingredient to mix into something like a glaze, marinades, dressings, even something like flavoring a soup base. It's just got a really nice savory flavor that complements a lot of different species of fish. And if you're not familiar with using it, I think it's worth a try, and it might be life-changing from a flavor perspective. So let's see, I think that's pretty much it. The last thing I want to share is kind of a kitchen tool is parchment paper. So, obviously this is great for lining something like a baking sheet for easy cleanup, but we're actually going to use something like this to create an envelope or packet to cook fish today as part of the cooking demo. But anytime you're using parchment to create a packet to steam fish, it's going to be a really, really easy, effortless meal. So let's go ahead and cook some fish. I have a fillet of coho that I defrosted in the fridge here. And as you can see, I actually defrosted it on paper towels. So it's absorbed some of the moisture on the fish. I don't really have to pat it dry anymore because it's been done. I'm going to steam this in a packet of, I don't think I'm going to be able to fit it in the parchment. This looks a little small. So I'm going to use aluminum foil, even though it's less pretty. This is a technique called cooking en papillote, and you can do it with foil, you can do it with parchment paper. Basically what it is you steam fish in its own juices and other ingredients, like a little delicious envelope of food. When you do it with foil, it's a little shinier and a little noisier. But to start, we're going to build a little vegetable platform. I just have some summer veggies here. I have some sliced summer squash and green beans. Summer vegetables are great for cooking in papillote because I would say generally a lot of them cook very quickly. So we have a little bit of olive oil on these veggies right now. And then let's go ahead and season this a little bit. On top of this, I'm going to place my fillet of salmon. I'm going to leave the skin on. This will keep the fish a little juicier as it cooks. I'm going to season this very lightly because on top of this, I'm going to add a layer of romesco. The sauce is already seasoned. That's why I'm seasoning the fish a little. So I'm just going to coat the top of this. And then we could go ahead and steam it like this because there are some juices in the sauce and in the fish. But I like to give this a little bit of a head start with what I will do sometimes is I'll take a little bit of miso paste and mix this up with some water, basically making a mini miso soup here, room temperature miso soup. And once I mostly dissolve this, just give this a taste. Should be tasty. Like I said, the miso is salty, so once it tastes good, then you can go ahead and pour it into the packet here. Now, the fun part, I think, is folding this into a packet. So this is much easier to do with foil because you can crimp it. If you're doing this with parchment paper, you want to make small pleats all around the edges, kind of like this. So imagine this is parchment, and then it'll usually form something that's kind of like a shape like a calzone or empanada. There's enough space in here for some of this steam to circulate around the fish and around the vegetables. And then we're just going to pop this into a preheated oven. I have an oven at 400 degrees right now. That's going to cook this fish maybe in about 8 minutes. So my timer just went off. So let's check on this fish. I have a feeling it's going to be done now. If not, we can always put it back into the oven. It smells good, which is always a good sign. Stab through here to see how the fish is doing. That looks like really low temperature. This is not my normal thermometer, so I almost don't trust it. I'm going to open this up first to see how it's looking. This is not flaking off very easily, so that means it's not done. So I'm going to let this cook maybe for 3 more minutes even. I'm hoping this is ready, and let's see how it is. Oh yeah, that looks a lot better. I can already tell. When I first opened it, the fish was a little bit like translucent on the side, but now it is perfectly opaque. If you see how easily this flakes off, just like, boop, that's the perfect bite there. Really, really delicious with that sauce on there. I'm really happy I tried this actually. So let's go ahead and move this to a serving bowl. just to show you. That's what it looks like plated. A lot of juices in here. Don't forget the juices. The juices are delicious. I'm gonna give this an official taste now. I just had that one little corner earlier, but the fish is perfectly cooked here. You can see it's like flaked, got this nice like cascade of flakes here. I love seeing that on the fish. Perfect. This is a really delicious summer combination of flavors and ingredients. So easy to make. Make sure you register for next week's live event. We're going to sear a crispy fillet of sockeye salmon. This is an essential skill for any home cook. And along with the salmon, we're going to make a very easy blueberry thyme compote to spoon all over the fish. Sounds fancy and feels fancy, but it's actually very, very easy to make. So thanks for joining us. Live wild.